This is the clip I want to play for you guys. This is Chris Hayes on MSNBC. It is like a 5-minute clip, so I'm going to play part of it. We'll see if we can get through the whole thing. But I think this kind of sums up the whole conversation that you're hearing coming out from normie, pundits out there coping with what is going on here. They are kind of trying to make this a partisan issue, which obviously Nico loves to talk about here. And I think this is just like a good summary of just what we're seeing. There is a new FUD line coming out right now, and it is targeted towards the Bitcoin strategic stockpile. Even though we've been covering throughout the last couple of weeks that is starting to catch fire, that signal starting to spread, and more countries are looking towards Bitcoin as a viable thing to add to their nation state treasury. With that being said, let's watch this clip.
So for very understandable reasons, Democrats and Democratic regulators have worked hard to keep crypto, which has been supremely volatile, blocked off from the rest of financial systems, so that if it crashes, it doesn't bring the entire U.S. economy down with it, requiring a bailout. Some rich people holding a lot of crypto disagree with that strategy. They want a bailout, implicit or explicit, if the house of cards comes crashing down. To that end, after Republicans took back the Senate with the help of money from the crypto industry, they now have a plan to return the favor. And I want you to listen to this part because no one's really talking about this, but the elements of the plot are just there in plain sight. Senate Republicans are working on a bill that would transfer billions and billions of dollars of money from the U.S. government, from taxpayers, and hand it over to a handful of big crypto holders.
Sounds like a great idea. For President Donald Trump. Here it is. This is the Bitcoin Reserve Bill in the Senate of the United States to establish a Bitcoin strategic reserve, a network of secure storage vaults, purchase program, and other programs to ensure the transparent management of Bitcoin holdings of the federal government.
Yes, the Bitcoin Act from Republican Senator Cynthia Lummis of Wyoming. It would establish a Federal Reserve of Bitcoin. It's truly one of the most audacious schemes I've ever seen in Congress. Here's why. Rich folks who own a lot of crypto have a problem, right? Cryptocurrency, Bitcoin in particular, is a very valuable asset. Single Bitcoin worth over 100 grand. Some very, very wealthy people own hundreds of millions or even billions of dollars worth of Bitcoin. David Sachs, for instance, has a lot of crypto. That said, it's not a liquid asset like cash that you can easily spend or invest or use for practical purposes. It has no practical use really outside of a few gimmicks, and it's very useful for criminal cartels. So if you're an investor, you're sitting on this speculative asset. You can't actually do anything with it, but it's worth a lot of money. What's more, if you try to sell it all off, right, to get rid of it, the hordes of Bitcoin on the exchanges, that's going to flood the market and tank the price. So what's the solution? They're going to sell it to the U.S. government.
Over 5 years, the United States will assemble 1 million Bitcoin, 5% of the world's supply. And it will be held for a minimum of 20 years and can be used for one purpose: reduce our debt.
Reduce our debt? You can't pay the debt down in Bitcoin. Are you tracking this? Are you tracking what's being planned and announced in person here, right? The U.S. government handing billions of dollars into the pockets of rich crypto holders? The plan is that the Bitcoin Act would have the government sell off some of its gold reserves, the stuff from Fort Knox, and use the money to buy 1 billion Bitcoin. At current market value, that would cost $100 billion. Now, the actual price would likely be much higher because that market value would almost certainly rise as a result when a new buyer enters the market and boosts the price of the asset the buyer is now legally obligated to buy.
Pause this shit right now. Okay. Oh my God. Okay, a couple things. First of all, he says that the U.S. government would be handing billions of dollars to rich crypto holders. No, the U.S. government would be buying the Bitcoin themselves. And Bitcoin is obviously a superior asset to gold, as has been reflected over the last 10 years. It would be a net positive for the country. What I don't like, too, is the class warfare. It really, really pisses me off because essentially the way that he's trying to frame it is, this is only going to benefit the rich at the expense of the poor. No, Bitcoin is not a zero-sum game. Everyone could win. If you buy $100 worth of Bitcoin a month and that's what you can afford, it's going to make your life better over time because you're saving your purchasing power from the ravages of inflation. You're actually able to save. So this whole class warfare type of bullshit is divisive. And again, he's not accurately portraying what Cynthia Lummis is proposing. Because Cynthia Lummis is just proposing that we allocate some of the gold reserves into Bitcoin, of which the US government would own, because the way that he was phrasing it is we would be giving this $100 billion to rich Bitcoin owners. Like, listen, the Bitcoin owner that owns $1,000 worth of Bitcoin on a percentage term, they're gonna benefit just as much as the Bitcoin owner that has 100 Bitcoin. Percentage wise, they're gonna benefit equally if the US government goes in and buys Bitcoin. And it would belong to the US government. It wouldn't belong, they're not just handing this money to the rich crypto owners. So this is divisive class warfare, which is, the rich, the oppressors, and the poor, the oppressed. That's bullshit. Bitcoin is the most inclusive, equitable money the world has ever seen. Because the world that Chris Hayes is advocating for is a world where, if depending on a country that you happen to be born in, you are entitled or you're not entitled to open a bank account. That sounds exclusive. That sounds really exclusive. And you know what class of people inflation affects the most? The lower and middle classes. Because they don't have the means to save in assets. They get ravaged every time the government prints money. And Bitcoin is a way for them to protect themselves from the ravages of inflation. Like, we just went through an election the last 4 years where clearly people are prioritizing the prices of their grocery bills. They're prioritizing what's going on with inflation. So, yeah, man, if they want to continue heading down this path of class warfare and demonizing Bitcoin and Bitcoin holders, I think that's a losing battle for them, as this last election showed. I think Bitcoin is bipartisan. It's not a left or right thing. Bitcoin is for everybody. But I will tell you this, Bitcoin is not for collectivists. Specifically, if you are, believing in this collectivist ideology where you believe that the government is all powerful and should have the right to redistribute wealth on a massive scale, like, Bitcoin is going to make that a little bit more difficult. I'm not going to lie. And I truly believe that the world is going to be a much better place for it, because these are the same people that are advocating for a system that completely betrayed my generation and the Zoomer generation. I remember 2008 were under a progressive president. I remember 2008 where the US government, on behalf of the American people, aka Main Street, bailed out Wall Street. They were given a bailout at the expense of all of us. If you want to know why you can't afford a home as a Gen Zer, as a millennial, it's because of that. It's because of that. But you know what? If you've been saving and earning in Bitcoin, it's not a question of can you afford a home? It's a question of when will you be able to afford a home? And if you're deep down the rabbit hole, you'll come to a realization of, no, I'm just going to rent, because if I buy a home, I'm probably going to end up with less Bitcoin. And one last thing I'll say before I pass it on to Opti, right? He mentioned 100 billion. We've sent 300 billion to Ukraine. Where's that money, bro? Have I benefited from that? That's thousands of miles away. There's homeless people all over the streets in some cities. There's crime. There's people that can't afford housing. and you're sending $300 billion to a foreign country to fund a war with a nuclear armed country, and you're literally lecturing me about putting $100 billion into Bitcoin, which clearly has shown that over the last 10 years, it is a superior asset to gold. Nah, you're relying on misrepresenting truths, misrepresenting the data for a political agenda. And you want to know why Elon Musk is telling you you are the media now? It's because of people like Chris Hayes. People are sick and tired of getting lied to. This is why MSNBC's ratings continue to plummet, because he's lying to your face. And at certain point, like maybe it's my culture, maybe it's like a Hispanic thing. If you're going to continue to lie to my face, I find that very disrespectful. And it's going to come to a point where I'm going to tune out and I'm going to watch something else. And instead of changing course and like looking within yourself and saying, you know what, like we're probably losing ratings because like we're not really reporting the news. This is kind of like propaganda. They double down and they call Elon Musk an extremist. Like, no, dude, like that world is over. You no longer have a monopoly on information. You no longer have a monopoly on the narrative. You're going to have to deal with independent thinking and people doing their own research and thinking critically. And in that type of world, you can't get away with bullshit, to be frank. And if it's simply Bitcoin that has to like rebuke the bullshit, so be it, Opti. We will rebuke the bullshit because that is so evil, this class warfare. No, listen, if you can only afford $20 of Bitcoin a month, and that's all you can afford. Listen, when I got into Bitcoin in 2016, this is for Chris Hayes. When I got into Bitcoin in 2016, I was living on my friend's couch, working a minimum wage job, and I stuck to it. Bitcoin gave me a career. Bitcoin gave me a business. Bitcoin got me to where I am today. 8 years of me working hard and believing. Minimum wage job, living on my friend's couch. So what is this that Bitcoin is for the rich? No. Everyone's going to benefit. And I'm going to be buying Bitcoin when it's at 1 million, when it's at 5 million, when it's at 100,000. Why? Why would I want to use dollars? Why would I want to use a money that steals from me? Why would I want to use a money that is constantly taking my purchasing power and redistributing it back to the government? The government completely is unaccountable. The Pentagon failed what? Their 8th audit in a row. If you did that to the IRS, you'd be put in jail. Like, no, dude, this is what this election was all about. People were sick and tired of the BS. They rebuked the legacy media. Trump won in a landslide. If you were just listening to legacy media, you would have thought that a totalitarian was elected. So we're tired of it. And it all started in 2008, the betrayal to the country by the government to bail out the elites, the Occupy Wall Street movement. This is all Bitcoin. This is what it's all about. Bitcoin was born. Do you think Bitcoin was born in 2009 out of coincidence? No, it was a protest. In the Genesis block of Bitcoin, it says, Chancellor, on the brink of the second bailout for banks. Do you think that's a coincidence? This is the people's money. This is the way for the people to protest against that said system. Chris Hayes is the elite. Chris Hayes is the political class that is oppressing the people. Bitcoin is the tool of which people are going to find freedom and break free from those chains of oppression that people like Chris Hayes are trying to psyop people into falling into. That is pure evil, misinformation, misrepresentation of the facts, and class warfare trying to divide people. based on the wealth that they've been able to acquire. Shame on you, Chris Hayes. You put journalists to shame. You're not a journalist. You're a propagandist. We're more journalists than you are. That's what I gotta say.